one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. We have a reasonably full schedule this morning, but some things will probably go fairly quickly. The first thing on our board, well, I'd like to welcome everybody here. We have some presentations today and some bid openings. And anybody who's watching us on Zoom, welcome and thank you for joining us. The first thing on our agenda today is the consent agenda. You all received that in your packet. If there's anything you want to pull from the consent agenda, now is the time to do it. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I hereby make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Berg moves to approve the consent agenda. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Was that Commissioner Gardner? Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. So first thing up today is a bid opening for the surplus land, the recycling center, and Gary Gear. You are up. Please state your name and who you represent for the record.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Gear, Canoga County Environmental Services Director. And yes, it is a bid opening for the recycling center. We had run the advertisements in November, December, and did not receive any bids. And I'm happy to say we have one bid this morning as we've re-advertised at the board's direction for sale. So I'll go ahead and just open this bid. All right, everything, I just wanted to make sure that everything was in as required with the bid. And the bid is for $90,000. And it is from Mark Zemer. And cashier's check is available as well. So the board, I think, can discuss that and choose to, I can add any input or any background information that you may have questions on as far as value or.
Was there an estimate for, like when we're letting out bids for construction, we have an engineer's estimate.
Yeah.
We have an estimate for.
We do not, and there is not a minimum bid requirement in the advertisement. According to state law, there isn't a minimum bid necessary. However, I mean, just to give you a starting point, the background work that I did, I just worked off of the 2022 assessed value,
Okay.
and that was $789,100. And then the equipment that we sold out of the building, I was trying to come to a number that would make us whole. Equipment sold was $267,000. And then utilities, repairs, and maintenance per year, which we've covered for 3 years now, not being open, $20,000. And then estimated the taxes that's not on the tax rolls sitting there currently as a county-owned facility, another $20,000. So breaking those numbers down, that would get us to $481,000 to kind of make us whole. But of course, it's up to the board to.
Are there any assessments?
There are no assessments.
Thank you. So you've heard the bid. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, that is a lot less than I had hoped by a long way. So weren't we originally kind of hoping for around 400 to 500,000? And this is.
I think that's a number that Larry and I had visited about previously prior to Kelsey being here.
Yeah.
And it isn't that a decision needs to be made today. The provision is within 30 days that we'd make a decision. So the board can act today or it could postpone to a future date.
Sure. Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that Commissioner Dale Anderson is not in attendance today, I think I would like to have us move this, table it and move it to our next meeting when presumably we're all going to be here.
So your motion is to table the decision till the March 21st meeting?
That's correct.
time certain.
Do you need a second on that
We
motion?
would need a second.
I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second to table the acceptance or rejection of the bid for the recycling center until the March 21st meeting. Any further discussion or questions? I do have one question. I might be out in left field a little bit, but did we look at the cost of demolition and selling just the real estate under that?
Sure.
We did not, but it's
Probably more.
25,000 square feet. It's a lot of facility. It would be
Yeah.
a significant cost, I would say. And it's hard because it's a sound structure. It's a
Yeah.
good building yet.
Yeah.
It's a little bit uniquely built so that, I'm sure even the bidder is considering remodeling costs or adjustments he'd have to make it work for him. But that's, so I guess to answer your question, no, I did not look
All
at
right.
demolition costs.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to table signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
Mr. Gear. Next up is a general business discussion regarding the appointment of a Middle Fork Crow River Watershed District Manager. Kelsey?
Good morning, Kelsey Baker, County Administrator. So I'm asking for a motion on the appointment of the Middle Fork River Watershed District Manager. We had one applicant, Amanda Touches. Her information was included in the board packet. She was going to try make it here today, but I don't see her in the audience. I think she would be a good recommendation for the district, so I'm asking approval on that today.
You've heard the recommendation from the administrator? I will make that motion. I know Amanda, I've served on that watershed, or not served, I've been there for many years, attending the meetings, and I'd like to move to accept Amanda Touches as a manager for the Middle Fork Watershed District. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Berg seconds. Any further discussion? The only comment I would make is unfortunately, I did have somebody ask me on Sunday about the position, but I said he was about a day or so late and maybe a couple days late in considering it. So there is some more interest out there, but I think Amanda will do a great job. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Russ Hilbert. Good morning. How are you?
I do have an update on the
For
financial.
those watching and listening, if you state your name and what you're here to represent.
My name is Russ Hilbert. I am the County Feedlot Officer, and I'm here to present the County Feedlot Annual Report for 2022 and requesting signature and approval of it. Part of that is the financial report. I made a mistake on the first one I had submitted. I have an updated copy if you want me to.
Sure.
pass those out.
If you got enough.
Go ahead. I was
Thank you.
10, so. The Feedlot Annual Report is a report of the work that I did in the feedlot program for 2022. We received some performance credits for going above the minimum program requirements of the feedlot program. Part of those program requirements are the 7% inspection rate. So anything above that, we receive a performance credit for. There are other program requirements that we are required to meet. If we don't meet a certain percentage of those, then we don't receive our performance credits for the following year. I did get my annual review with the PCA and did meet all of those minimum program requirements. So we would be eligible to receive the full performance credit amount required that we would receive. For 2022, if you look at the annual or the financial report, we recorded 64 and a quarter performance credits, and we received in 2023, or sorry, 2022, we received $11,922.55. That's a little over $185 per credit. The max we can ever receive is $199 per statute, so we're pretty close to being topped out. So we try to receive as many as we can in a year, so. If there's any questions, I'd sure be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Russ? Well, thank you for this. You looking for a recommendation to approve this report?
Yes, and a signature.
So I'd entertain a motion to approve the feedlot report.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept the 2022 feedlot annual report.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson moves to accept the report. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Russ. Pardon me? So do you
Have
have,
one printed in here. Oh,
With the sign.
yep, that's
today is 6th or 7th?
7.
Do you need another one signed by me?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, thank you for your patience, everyone. I hate to make Russ have to run back for a signature, so we try to do these when we have time as we move along. Next up is the Public Health Emergency Unwind Date. Jenny, you were looking forward to this date for a long, long time, haven't you?
It has been a long time coming, I will say that. Good morning, members of the board, Jenny Lippert, Health and Human Services Director, and with me, I also have two of our supervisors from our income maintenance programs. With me is Dana Wenish and also Deb Grunwald. I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint here. Okay, so we are going to explain some changes that will be coming down regarding the unwinding of the public health emergency. So to give you a little background, Congress passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. The law ends the Medicaid continuous coverage requirements from the end of the COVID-19 public health emergency, and it provides a new statutory end date to the continuous coverage, which is March 31st of 2023. The changes to the MA continuous coverage requirement and the return to our normal medical assistance requirements and enrollment policies is what you will hear referred to as the unwinding of the public health emergency. So continuous coverage helped Minnesotans access care during the global pandemic and maintained high insurance coverage rates in the state of Minnesota. It also allowed Minnesota to receive billions of additional federal dollars and fundings under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the first major federal stimulation package that was passed by Congress. With these continuous coverage provisions in place, enrollment in medical assistance, or what is referred to as the Minnesota's Medicaid program, and Minnesota Care has grown by more than 330,000, or roughly 28% in Minnesota. To break that down a little further, about 1 in 4 residents living in the state of Minnesota now get their healthcare coverage through these public healthcare programs. The other piece that we'll be talking about is the SNAP and eSNAP programs. So again, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Minnesota received a waiver for this federal government program to temporarily provide extra SNAP benefits or eSNAP for those in the state of Minnesota. So just to give you a little bit more, I think what you'll hear from these two supervisors who have really been on top of conversations with the Department of Human Services is this is general information as to what we know at this time. We are finding out that the Department of Human Services doesn't have some exact timelines, some trainings that have been deferred. So again, I would just caution that this is the information that we know at this time. I'm going to pass it over to Deb.
Good morning.
Deb Grunwald, Supervisor at Candor County Health and Human Services in the financial area. Just wanted to go over a little bit about the medical assistance program and what the unwinding means. Beginning March 1st of 2020, the medical assistants and Minnesota Care enrollees could no longer have negative actions taken against their cases. And that was because of the public health emergency. So the Minnesota Department of Human Services stopped all renewals and allowed for continuous coverage policies that were initiated. This is for medical assistance and the Minnesota Care coverage. And this was to make sure that there was high insurance coverage during the public health emergency. And this also allowed the state of Minnesota to receive dollars so that they could proceed with these programs, and those fundings were under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So on the slide right now is talking about what continuous coverage meant, and that meant that we could not close any people on medical assistance unless these specific categories. If someone passes away, if someone moved out of the state of Minnesota, we still couldn't close them unless we could verify that with the person. If persons would request their cases closed, we could close them at that time. We could not close any cases or remove anyone from medical assistance if they were not cooperating with child support, any kind of third-party insurance, or medical service questionnaires non-cooperation. We also could not move anyone from a higher eligibility of medical assistance to a lower eligibility, which means we couldn't move someone from medical assistance down to Minnesota Care. And the spend downs, and those are like a health insurance deductible, and waiver obligations and premiums, we could not increase those, but we could not do any adverse actions. So just to go over what those numbers mean, and Jenny talked a little bit about that, but in the state of Minnesota, medical assistance and Minnesota Care enrollment has grown by 330,000 enrollees, or 28%. 1 in 4 residents in Minnesota now get their health coverage through public assistance healthcare programs. And then Candioi County specifically has 14,456 enrollees as of January 31st. And this represents 33% of our county's population, which is about 1 of every 3 residents. So enrollment has kind of increased from 11,404 as of February 28th. And so this is an increase of 27% enrollment in public assistance funded health care. So some of the anticipated obstacles when they start to unwind, which means that they're going to be having us look at cases by groups. So we currently have 12 eligibility workers who are trained to do the healthcare programs. 6 have never worked outside of the public health emergency rules. And so this includes completing renewals, any adverse changes, and normal processing standards. Many of the cases have outdated addresses, and that's been a real problem. We're afraid that people aren't getting the mail that they need to receive to renew their eligibility. Phone numbers are out of date. So that means that the agencies are, that our agency is unable to connect with clients to determine ongoing coverage. So out of the 12 eligibility workers that I mentioned, 5 carry other caseloads such as adult programs, including SNAP and cash, housing supports, and the long-term care programs. So this limits the time that they have available to work on some of these healthcare programs. So some of the potential impacts that we're anticipating is that enrollees may have interruptions in treatment and care when we start to unwind their medical assistance coverage. And that would include prescription drugs, nursing home payments, and assisted living payments, and increased out-of-pocket expenses. Providers will probably be impacted by this. They may experience delayed payments or have increases in uncompensated care. And the workload and complexity of the case management will increase for county eligibility staff. And we're fearful about burnout and affecting our program integrity and our staff. So programs such as long-term care will begin asset evaluations. There's a $3,000 asset limit for people in long-term care. And during the course of the public health emergency, they were not required to reduce those assets down to below 3,000. So many clients will likely be over the asset limits due to increases in income, but no increase in expenses for spend downs or their obligation changes. So DHS has come up with a tentative plan based on what they're hearing from the feds also. They're offering some refresher trainings, and that includes some of these complex sort of cases with people that are employed and have disabilities, spend downs, assets, long-term care burials, and institution for mental diseases, and there's a lot of other programs that would be related to that. So the online refresher courses, they have been posted by DHS, and supported learning sessions will begin in late May, which is the first month that those new renewals will go out for that first group. And those renewals will be due for July 1st. July is the first month of the renewals, and it's been 29 months since we last did renewals for those elderly or disabled. Dana's going to talk a little bit about SNAP and eSNAP, but did you have any questions about the medical assistance part of it? It's really complicated and hard to really get to the details, but our staff are working hard, and we're just at this point not really sure what to anticipate, but we're just trying to gear up. We know there will be more work.
Commissioner Berg.
Just had a couple of questions. As I understand, this is not just a Kennewick County problem, but this is a statewide problem. And one of the issues with, this program is not like we can just go ahead and do this. We provide the services and under the direction of the state. It's really unfortunate that we're in this position right now, because these people are going to need these services, and the providers need to put them. So I'm really concerned about this. Are you aware of, maybe Ms. Lippert would have a comment too, is there any legislation to help us with this, or is that going to come later?
It might, for time's sake, it might be better to wait for questions until
Sure.
the overall presentation,
Okay.
because then I will follow up with some additional information that might clear some questions up.
Thank you.
All right. I had some questions too regarding your
Okay.
presentation, but to Ms. Lippert's, to your comment, why don't we go through the presentation, we'll write them down, and then we'll
Yeah.
come back.
Sounds good.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Dana Wenish. I'm an income maintenance financial assistance supervisor. Let's see here. So many of you are probably familiar with the term SNAP. It's a federally funded government program that provides financial help to those who qualify in order to supplement their nutritional needs. SNAP benefits are determined by household size and income, but there is no asset test for SNAP benefits. When we're talking about eSNAP, emergency SNAP benefits started at the beginning of the public health emergency with the first issuance in March of 2020. These were always meant to be temporary benefits to help navigate the rising food costs and maintain healthy diets when people are being laid off, having reduced employment hours, and other obstacles. Just as an example, just so you kind of grab the complexity of it, the maximum benefit for a household of 2 is $459. In normal times, that would mean they have little to no income, shelter deductions, so that would zero out what some of their income would be. A client and their spouse may only be eligible for the $23 due to their income, but with the eSNAP, an additional $436 is issued. So each month, they were getting that maximum of $459. A lot of clients have become dependent on this. We get regular phone calls every month around the time that issuance typically happens, asking if they're still going to get them. And we've been trying to catch everybody that's calling, reminding them that these benefits are going to end in March, with February being the last issuance. When I
Dana,
say
if-
February,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I said we have questions later, but I have a clarification question. The 436 is what's going to end as a result of the unwinding of the
correct.
emergency.
That would be the
So
additional.
that was on
supplement.
top of 459.
Nope, so the 459 would be the maximum amount.
Okay,
If someone only gets $23 a month in a normal time, so outside of COVID rules, we're going to the maximum amount that they'd be eligible for. So they'll get $23 on the first of the month and then $436 on like the 8th. So for that total benefit maximum.
okay,
Does that help?
yes.
Okay. Sorry, I talked fast and I try to slow down. When I'm saying that eSNAP benefits are set to end February 2023, February benefits are actually distributed in March. They're due to be distributed the 8th, 9th, and 10th of this month. So this will be the last time people get these eSNAP benefits, which would be the 8th, 9th, and 10th of this month. People have received notice of this action through mail correspondence, social media announcements. Again, when they're calling in, we're trying to remind everybody that we have contact with that those benefits will end. Some of the numbers, excuse me, just so you have kind of an idea, we've had an increase of 276 cases from the beginning of January 2020 through January 20 of 23, so 15% increase. The total amount of eSNAP that's been issued in Candy Ohio County was just over $14 million. So on those 2,141 cases, over that time frame, each family got approximately $3,500 in benefits. People, again, anticipated obstacles, people have come to expect the eSNAP. Increased food prices, shelter costs, and transportation costs are already a stress on people's budget. I do anticipate seeing people coming back trying to get redetermination in benefits, which is going to kind of drag out a little bit of the process. DHS has indicated there will be no appealing of the eSNAP benefits because it wasn't a budgeted awarded benefit. But as we all know, that's not going to stop people from trying to appeal something like that. We haven't had much direction as what to do with these appeals at this time. If we receive an appeal, our intention right now is to send it on to DHS, just like we normally would, so that they can schedule an appeal hearing, determine whether or not that's going to be appropriate. If you've ever done an appeal for DHS, it is a time-consuming process. So we still have to write up our summaries and submit paperwork and all of our evidence, complete the hearing. Our hope is that they will deny the appeal hearing just based on what they're telling us, but we don't have that information yet. Clients will again be requested to work with Employment Services, which is CareerForce. When the PHE started, they no longer had to meet some of those work requirements. They didn't have to go up and meet with Career Services, have a work plan in place. Now they will be required to do so. If their cases are opening and closing, we do anticipate some of that time could be a lengthy process when you have to close a case and reopen a case and redetermine a case. So that's that creation of a cycle of cases, which is going to be a little bit dreaded, I won't lie. Let's see. I think this is where we're going to have Jenny take from here.
So, as you can hear, this is very, very, very complicated. There's a lot of moving targets. So there is the potential likelihood of the possibility of needing some overtime for our current staff to make sure that we get all of the cases gone through in the amount of time that we feasibly can. There also could be the possibility of our agency having performance improvement plans in the future due to not meeting some of the requirements and deadlines as we're trying to fix what has taken place over these last few years and implement all of the new or what was the current policies and practices. Lots of different scenarios that I would imagine we're going to have some upset constituents. I would anticipate that you all will get calls and questions regarding different scenarios. Some scenarios that I just want to bring to your attention. We talked about long-term care. So somebody has a family member that moved into a long-term care facility under these parameters, and maybe they sold a house. And now when we go through and look at their portfolio, they might now need to look at moving to a different location, and how will we handle that, and what's the county's response to something like that. PCA services, we have a lot of individuals that receive PCA services in Candioi County, and there might be a parent that quit their job and has been relying on PCA payments to be able to stay home and take care of a child. And now with these requirements, that might no longer be the case. And I think we're going to have some upset people. We are trying to stay on top of this. We have a lot of internal conversations. As you can imagine, this affects all of our areas in some degree. Min choices, waivers, again, it kind of goes through the whole spectrum of health and human services. My ask for all of you is don't try to unravel this yourself. If you're getting upset, folks, direct them to myself so I can get them to the appropriate people to get them the information that is needed. There is a House File 2286, and that's in the Senate File 2265. I believe it was heard last week regarding the unwinding of the public health emergency, and I want to say it was roughly $36 million that the state was looking at trying to give to counties to do this work. I will say that's wonderful, but it takes a lot of time to train these staff on the programs. And that's why my ask in talking to Administrator Kleindl before, and now with Administrator Baker on staffing, is I don't know at this time that it makes sense to ramp up on staff to get us through these next couple months or year that it might take to get all of these cases worked through, because of the amount of time that it takes to train staff. And we have had turnover in this area that is not unique to Candioi County. You see that across the state and definitely across our 6 and 8 regions. So the complexities, I just don't think at this time it makes sense to ramp up staffing. So that's why I'm just maybe anticipating some overtime of staff to work through these cases, but also being conscious of assuring we're not burning staff out. So it will take time. We will definitely come back and update you and give additional presentations as needed. But I would open up this time for additional questions.
My first question is, do you want to share your personal cell phone number with?
Well,
Any questions for any of the presenters? Go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, so my question is, so does this go back to the pre-pandemic policies, or is it changed?
Yes, it goes back to pre-pandemic. However, income guidelines, right, have changed to current times.
Okay.
So there would be some changes for the income guidelines.
Okay. And then, so these people that are getting assistance now, it doesn't necessarily go away, it just maybe gets reduced as...
Yes, and there would be some folks that might no longer be eligible to receive any assistance.
Okay, all right, that's why they gotta call you. So
Yes, yep, and I
okay.
think even the folks that will have a reduction, they've been relying on this. Again, you hear from Dana, who talked about the SNAP benefits. People have been managing their household and feeding their children on this allotted amount of money, and now if that's totally cut or in half or a fraction now that they'll be receiving, they're going to have to find additional ways to maintain the lifestyle they've been living.
Okay,
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. So earlier on, you said there was like a huge increase, 28%, I think is the number I heard, perhaps both in SNAP and in medical assistance. Was that increase due to more lenient eligibility?
Sure, you can go ahead. Yep.
And a follow-up question to that would be is that if that was the case and they no longer are eligible, after you've answered all the questions and taken all the appeals, you mentioned, I guess there's several questions in here. You mentioned the 12 or so people that, or 9, whatever it is, that have only worked during the pandemic period. Does that mean that long-term there'll be less need for staff? I mean, I'm hearing just the opposite, especially for the short term, but because you won't have as many eligible enrollees or applicants.
Well, some of the growth comes from the fact that before the pandemic, we had all of the people that were already on Minnesota Care and medical assistance.
Can you step a little closer to the
Yep.
mic?
Then as, the pandemic progressed, people were being laid off, lost their jobs, had hours cut, then they would qualify. Because of the continuous coverage restrictions, we couldn't remove anybody. So we weren't lessening those numbers, but adding more and more people as the need grew and they would qualify. So yes, we may be reducing some of our enrollees, but I'm not seeing tons of people that have those kind of changes yet, because a lot of people still aren't at full hours, or they haven't found work that was equal pay to what the previous, pandemic pays were, depending on the jobs that they found.
If I can add one thing.
Sure.
So now moving forward, our staff will have to be looking at these cases constantly. So we haven't necessarily had to do that because of the restrictions that were in place. They still were in cases and updating certain things, but again, not removing or decreasing somebody's benefits. And so to answer maybe your question about staffing, I don't see a reduction in staff because these staff are going to be continually updating and reaching out to clients and asking for this set of documents where we haven't had to do that. And I would say that's why we've maintained staff, is with that increase of the number of cases that we've had downstairs, but yet moving forward, it's going to be a different style of work that they'll be doing, if that makes sense.
And I think I'm understanding that if someone continues to be eligible, the amount they receive, is there an inflation adjustment in there? For everybody knows that the cost of food has jumped remarkably in the last 18 months. So those that continue to be eligible based on their income, will they get increased payments because price of food is more expensive?
It's not based on that. Every October, the SNAP benefits are increased. Some of the standard deductions and things are increased every October. And that's been going on throughout the pandemic. It's just this particular situation of losing the emergency SNAP benefits. They'll go back to looking at what their income is versus what their shelter is. And whatever the formula is for the SNAP, then that's what they'll be getting. They just won't be getting the maximum amount.
Okay.
Which people have been depending on for a long time now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Berg.
Well, just a question on your statistics, going back to the SNAP program. So from January 2022 to the current date now, or January of this year, there was an increase of 276 cases totally? So that's the total number of increases for the whole county.
Correct.
That doesn't sound like a large amount, but, right?
But when you only have, how many workers would you say we have in adult and family? On average, we would have around 12 workers. When you add 276 cases, it is quite a few when you're already adding that to a large caseload.
That's in addition to all the others, yes.
Yeah, yep,
Yes,
yep.
yes. Gotcha. So when you're looking at this, if I may, Mr. Chair, so we're looking at several different kinds of programs and prioritizing our programs too. They're all very important. But when
Right.
you're talking about people who are in skilled nursing care or something like that, and they can't have afford it or stay there anymore. That's really a major area of priority that we have to
Yes,
concentrate on.
and long-term care actually is a big concern in our department. We have 2 people that cover our long-term care caseload. Our long-term care caseload is currently 331 cases, which is really high to split between 2 people. And when you start looking at the complexity, I'm sure Shane could attest to some of this. We've had some issues lately.
Yeah.
Even getting a case approved is really time-consuming, so now working backwards and, pulling each thread out is going to be a very time-consuming process.
Mr. Chair, just one more follow-up, or just a comment at this point. Going back to what I started to say is, this is a state problem, and the legislative problem is the Department of Human Services problem, and it's on our lap, and we got to deal with it. And our toolbox is pretty empty right now. So I appreciate what you're doing for your staff, and I guess I really feel that what is needed we can do within reason. We're going to be here to support you in that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we talk about, impacts, some of the potential impacts are some people could lose their long-term care. Some families would have to find different arrangements for people who needed skilled nursing care. We're going to have any number of people who no longer qualify for these food benefits, who are now going to have to go to their local food shelf, which is already a system under enormous strain. And we're going to see some people potentially who are going to experience housing insecurity or even homelessness. If I'm a legislator down in St. Paul, I'd better be taking notice of this and figuring something out, because this is not a tenable situation. And DHS appears to be, and maybe it's just the way it is, making it up as they go along. Do I have that about right?
I would say to that, some of our thoughts on maybe the limited communications or guidance that maybe we're receiving from the Department of Human Services gives us some hope that maybe in these next couple weeks we'll get some changes that would be able to alleviate some of these problems that we're faced with or will be faced with. I know that I can say our association, MAXA, is heavily on top of this in conjunction with AMC. Again, a bill was just heard last week, so I hope that there's some traction and some voices. But again, I think the state is almost landlocked because a lot of these are coming down from the federal government. So again, it's that ripple effect, and then it comes to us at the counties. So I think our hope is we will be able to voice some of those concerns and questions, and even we've talked internally about maybe some ideas and just sending an idea forward on how we could maybe unravel some of this better at the local level. So we're hopeful with maybe some time, but as you can see with some of the anticipated timelines that we're up against, there isn't much time for us to hold off. So we'll try our best. Again, we'll try to stay on top of it and be in good communication. And again, I would say we're hopeful that there might be some adjustments that could be made in the future.
Well,
So
thank
stay
you for-
tuned.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your work
Commissioner
on
Anderson.
this, and I'm not angry with you guys.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair. So my question would be, does this have to be done in April, or is it by July? What's your timeline that?
There are 2 different timelines, and I'll let these 2 speak to them for the different programs.
So for the medical assistants, the first reviews that are going to be sent out that people need to respond to is in the month of May for their July benefits. And that's just a group of people. They're not going to do everyone all at once. They're going to go, they're calling them cohorts. So they're going to, each month, there's going to be a group of people that will be required to review their medical assistance eligibility. As far as the eSNAP, that ends as of this week for the month of February. After this month, they won't see any extra emergency SNAP benefits. So those are the 2 differences of those 2 programs.
Okay, but they can still get SNAP?
if they're eligible.
Yeah, so
if they're
then they
eligible.
still have to do an eligibility, they got to get reviewed then.
Yes, every year they are reviewed, every 6 months usually.
Okay, so they were getting reviewed prior to this?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they
Okay,
were,
so
yeah.
that's kind of up to date.
There was a period of time during the pandemic that they didn't, but I think it was September of 2021 that the SNAP and the cash program started to, they didn't call it unwinding then, but they started to go back to some of their normal rules.
So the
So it's
medical
been
was-
really hard to keep track of what rule belongs to what program, but our staff are doing a great job.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys for that very good report.
Thank you.
Appreciate your hard work. And we will take a 5-minute recess. Next up on our agenda is Ace Bonawah from the Emergency Management Services. And you're going to present on a couple of grants. Thank you, Ace, for being here.
That's right. My name is Ace Bonham. I'm Deputy Emergency Management Director for the county. Here to seek your approval on a couple of two separate projects. The first is a Mid-Minnesota Development Commission Community Enhancement Funding Grant in the amount of $2,510. This is a no-match required grant that's helping provide the Kennewick County Rescue Squad with some high-pressure pneumatic airbags. These airbags support literally tons of weight and create space and stability in order to rescue people. The second is an Alliance Pipeline Safe Community Grant in the amount of $7,500. Again, this is a no-match grant. We plan to use this grant to equip an already purchased trailer with things such as cones, tents, lighting, tables, chairs, public address, and other items to enhance our ability to quickly set up a disaster assistance center or an emergency shelter or even an alternate emergency operations center. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the two projects. Otherwise, I'd ask your approval to allow us to accept these grant funds.
Why don't we take them one at a time? Let's move first on the, if that's your wish, on the pipeline one. And then, so I would entertain a motion on accepting the pipeline grant.
I so move to accept that. pipeline
Commissioner
grant.
Berg moves. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Now, if you have any questions or comments on these, how these grants are, I appreciated the fact that you explained in your presentation what you're going to use the dollars for. So, any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the grant from the Alliance Pipeline in the amount of $7,500, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Now, we also have the second smaller grant from Mid-Minnesota Development Commission. How do you wish to proceed on that? Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we approve the MMDC Community Enhancement Grant.
We have a
Accept.
motion on the floor for the Community Enhancement Grant from Mid-Minnesota Development Commission. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Any questions or comments? Hearing, go ahead.
The only comment is two grants with no matching funds.
Good day.
Great.
Good day.
Thank you. Being on top of it, Ace. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. All in favor of the, or did you have a question?
No.
Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries. Thank
Again,
you,
we
Ace.
thank you and also thank Mid-Minnesota Development and Alliance Pipeline.
Yep.
Yes.
You
Thank
didn't have anything you needed for me to sign, did you?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we have a professional services agreement discussion. Krista?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here before you today. If you recall, back in 2019, you passed a resolution for us to apply for a Minnesota Public Facilities Authority grant for Big Candy Lake. They split that into 3 different sections on the lake for SSTS enhancement. A lot of those properties all have, holding tanks or have older systems that are starting to fail. So we were, this is the second portion. The first portion was done last year on the Bonnie Beach area. This year is the northeast section of the lake. So we have been granted a $60,000 grant. It is in cooperation with the Lake Association, Big Candy Lake Association. Candy, Ohio County is acting as the financial side of that. So the monies will transfer through Candy, Ohio County, and then out to the consultant. So what I'm here before you today is we received a professional services agreement proposal from Stantec, and they would be providing the services for this type of project to see if they would be able to move forward in having a cluster system possibly, or some sort of other alternatives out there on the lake.
So for clarification, what would be approving today is the agreement with Stantec or accepting the grant, or both?
Nope, it would be the agreement with Stantec.
Okay.
Yep, the agreement, or the grant and everything has already been done.
And the agreement then would, or Stantec would be providing the engineering and the planning for the cluster system that,
Right, and they would submit or have a community assessment report that they would have at the end of it to show what they found.
All right, thank
So
you.
this is basically just a planning stage to see if it would even be possible out there to have an alternative system.
So you've heard the recommendation from planning and zoning. What are your wishes?
I just have a question. You said it's the northeast part of the lake, and for me, is that by Park 2 or over closer by Park 1? I mean,
Yeah, so it's going to be,
I think
is that
part-
165th that runs along there?
oh, God.
Sorry, I do have a map here.
You do, okay. Yeah, if you could put that up so we can see that.
If it's northeast, it would have to be
I think
Kansas.
Kind of small, so I
Yeah,
apologize for
Candy,
that, but.
maybe, right? It would be Candy. Is it Candy East that would be by?
Yes, and it would run right in front of there,
Okay.
actually. So it's going to be
Okay,
this
yeah.
portion of the lake.
Okay, I just needed that clarification. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we, let's see, we get professional services agreement with Canada County and Stantec Consulting Services.
Commissioner Anderson moves on the recommendation from planning and zoning. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Krista.
Thank you very much. Did you want to sign this now, or do you want me to?
We have it.
I, okay. All right, AMC funding formula for community corrections. Tammy Jo Lieberg, welcome.
Good morning, Tammy Jo Lieberg. As you said, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here. Give me a minute.
Is that the Spicer Castle?
What was that?
Is that the Spicer Castle? Or maybe you're not seeing what we're seeing. Just kidding.
I don't think I see what you're seeing. And somebody loaned me their jump drive this morning, so it may be something else. Hopefully it's nothing. So good morning. Again, Tammy Jo Lieberg, Director of Community Corrections. I am here today to give you an update on our supervision funding formula that we're working on with the Association of Minnesota Counties at AMC. So I'm going to give us a brief update or background to make sure we kind of see where we're at, and then I'll give you a little bit of an update. So what we're talking about is funding in Minnesota for community corrections. Supervision in Minnesota is kind of complicated. We have 3 distinct delivery systems. We have the Department of Corrections, we have what's called county probation offices, and then we have Community Corrections Act counties. Candy, Ohio has chosen to be a Community Corrections Act county since sometime in the late 70s or early 80s. We've had that designation, which means that we supervise all probation and supervised release cases across the county, from juveniles to misdemeanors to supervised release, or what people understand as parole. In other parts of the state, they might have Department of Corrections that supervises felony supervision, and then they have county probation officers that do juvenile and misdemeanor. The map that I have in front of you shows how it's differentiated across the state, and this is really where we can see how each area can pick what's best for their own jurisdiction, what they feel serves their community the best. You can see the majority of our of supervision actually in the state of Minnesota is supervised by Community Corrections Act counties. It's something a lot of people forget, that they think Department of Corrections is in charge of community supervision, but actually Community Corrections Act counties supervise almost 75% of the supervision in the state. You can see 20%. And these statistics are a little off. It says 70%, but we're almost at 75% because we have 2 jurisdictions joining us this year as Community Corrections Act counties. And we're going to continue to see that as more jurisdictions join Community Corrections Act counties as we go forward. Several of the CPO counties are looking at transitioning over into CCA. The majority of the offenders in the state are supervised by CCAs. So that's one of the biggest things to think about. So funding is where we have what we're trying to correct, right? So funding is very complicated because we are unique and we have these 3 delivery systems. We also have 3 separate ways of funding across the state. DOC contract counties, which isn't our county, right? We're CCA. I'm just giving this as a background. This would be areas like Meeker County, or or potentially Douglas County have DOC contract counties, where the county is actually billed for services back by Department of Corrections. So they pay the Department of Corrections to supervise parts of their supervision. Other counties are reimbursed for felony supervision and supervised release, or intensive supervised release is provided by the state. Where this comes, and then the county probation offices are even more complicated. That's where a county probation office receives, or by statute, is supposed to get 50% of reimbursement by the state for their supervision. The state has not met that, and CPO counties are usually around about 24% of their funding is coming from the state, even though in statute it does say 50%. So when we talk at the legislature, that's why you hear a lot of discussion about, well, that 50% mark, that 50% mark. Felony supervision, again, and intensive supervised release is actually funded, should be funded by the state in full. And then we have CCA, and we're a complicated system for CCA funding, but it's actually worked very well in providing us the funding other than just not having enough. It's driven by multiple different options related to population, our tax base, how many convictions in your county, and we use a 3-year average so that the funding is stable. This funding has, again, not kept up with the requirements and the needs of the counties. Part of the problem that we have had in providing that is that the legislature funds funds the DOC. The DOC funds the prisons, which is their primary function. Then they have to actually fund themselves, which due to contracts, union negotiations and different things, the Department of Corrections has to fund their funds first. And then what's left is divided between CPO and CCA counties. This is why we haven't had a stable funding source. The funding has gone up and down over the years, and it has not kept up with the needs in individual counties. So, as part of this discussion, it's important to talk about how Minnesota relies heavily on supervision to keep communities safe. Actually, only 8% of our correctional population is in the prison. 92% are on community supervision. That means we supervise them in the community. Another statistic to keep in mind when we're talking about this is when we send somebody to prison, we don't get to throw away the key. 96 to 97% of offenders that go to prison come back into our communities. So it's really important for us to really think about how do we want them to come back into our communities? How are we going to provide safety and rehabilitation options? Another statistic, I've showed you guys before when we've been talking about this through the Council of State Governments. They came in the last couple of years and talked about how community supervision works. In 2020, Minnesota spent the lowest proportion of general funds on corrections for the entire country. Our state is funding 2.5% of our general fund is going to corrections in total. And that includes prison and community supervision. So this really goes to show how underfunded our corrections has been and consistently over time. So why is this background a little bit important as we talk about where we're going? And it's supervision funding in Minnesota is complicated. It makes it very difficult. Over the years that I've been working on funding from the legislature, even when we would go in and ask for increases, oftentimes the legislature would tell us, or our representatives would say, hey, we funded you last year, we gave you this big increase. And we would have to say, that funding increase actually went to the prisons, and then it went to DOC, and our funding increase was just minuscule compared to that and didn't even keep up with where the costs were going. So it's really difficult to explain and understand how these fundings differ. And also you can even see when I have testified at the legislature and other people have been down there, they've come back and they've said, well, 50%, we know we're supposed to get to that 50%. Well, actually that's the CPO funding formula. That doesn't actually even have anything to do with our CCA formula. So it's so complicated and difficult to explain that part of our task as part of our subgroup and our committee at AMC has been how do we simplify this and make that funding formula equitable across the state, because right now we're looking at how funding for corrections is different from one county to the next. We don't want our services to be dependent on where you live geographically. We want it to be equitable from one area to the next. So that's where we're at. So We have been working on this funding formula. Back in the 90s, we called it single funding formula. We've had several different iterations of this as we've gone forward, but every time we brought this forward over the last 15, 20 years, we would almost be fighting with each other. Our 3 delivery systems, we would be saying, oh, we need this money, they need this money. Everybody's arguing back and forth. A few years ago, we actually joined forces. It is a historic thing where we are actually all in agreement and we are working together to come up with a funding formula that is equitable across all 87 counties. As part of that, we brought in the Council of State Governments about 3 years ago. They came in and provided a lot of research and collaboration across the state. And then in the past year, the Association of Minnesota Counties has taken up this charge. And I have been a part of that committee working on it. We have met multiple times as a large committee and as a subgroup. This includes county commissioners from all 3 delivery systems. So we had 2 county commissioners that serve DOC districts. We had 2 county commissioners that serve CCA districts, and we have 2 county commissioners that serve CPO districts. And then we have directors from the county probation office, from CCA departments, and 2 supervisors from the Department of Corrections. As part of that, we also did a workload study, really fast, down and dirty, got into it, and asked we had 20% of our probation officers participate across the state. Due to timing, it was a little off because we had to do it over the holidays, which was not the best time to do a workload study, as you can imagine, with vacations and holidays, but we got what we wanted done, at least started those numbers, hoping to have at least a base level to start with that we'll come back with again in 2 years. So this continued work, we have been doing this we've had assistance from the Council of State Governments. We have also had several other research groups working with us from across the nation. We've also had American Parole and Probation Association, and we're looking at how do we find a single funding formula that allows us to make those decisions at a local basis, but also is appropriate in the level of state funding that provides the services we need to reduce recidivism and protect the public. The bill that we are proposing that has gone forward, it was actually proposed already in the House. We have potential, I think it'll be introduced this week in the Senate. The House file number is 1838. It has the general language associated with it. It has a placeholder for the formula that we're creating at this time. I'm going to go through a little bit of the formula. Not the entire piece of it yet because it's not totally public yet, but we'll get there. We also have on March 17th, we're going to have a full hearing at the legislature to address House File 1838. So we'll have more information to come on that. So the key takeaways of part of this is all 87 counties have now agreed. As you are aware, I brought the resolution forward and you, as a board, supported our resolution back in January. As of last week, we had all 87 counties on board. And so saying that this is where we need to be going towards for funding and for corrections in the state of Minnesota. We are looking for a fair, equitable, transparent funding model that allows for local decision-making and local control. And it is also an investment in providing better public safety outcomes and improving the lives of the individuals that we work with. So just some funding principles where we started as part of this is we wanted to continue to allow for county choice. We needed it to be stable funding because, as you can imagine, if our funding jumped all over the place, it wouldn't be good for good services to our communities. We wanted to develop evidence-based practices across our state where some places they haven't had that opportunity to. We want to include all 3 delivery systems. We want each jurisdiction to be able to choose what delivery system works best for them. It needs to address inadequate funding because in many of our jurisdictions, we have not seen that funding principle. There's some areas where the counties are paying the majority of the costs for all of the things that are going on in community corrections. And we wanted to make sure that we address the base level services. And one of the things that we talk about is the fact that there's a lot of great program ideas out there, and we're hearing lots of really good ideas, especially this year at the legislative level, of doing things like treatment programs. We have community-based mental health stuff, bringing individuals from our jails into the prison systems, and these are all great ideas of what's going. Restorative justice is another one. But the problem that we're running into is this is really our base level funding, and we need to look at our base level funding before we start adding extra programs, because the base level funding is really where everything starts. So this is a little bit of the basics of the formula we created. This was, as we talked about, we included county commissioners and practitioners and different people coming across the board. We were trying to address all of the things that I just mentioned, that it would be stable, that it would provide that base level funding, that it would be equitable, and that every county had the exact same funding formula across the board, so that we would rise and fall together if it happened one way or the other. So part of that is looking at that base floor. So what is the minimum cost that it would cost to open a probation office or keep a probation office open? We were looking at $200,000 or $250,000 is where it was recommended. Actually, council state governments looked at across the state and said the minimum level to keep the lights on in every county would probably be about $250,000. Then we're looking at what the appropriation from the previous year, so we don't have a huge jump from year to year. Looking at the geography, how big is your county? Part of that has to do with how far you're traveling, what you're doing, in terms of when you're going to see clients, where things are at. What is your population base? Now that's really important. I would tell you the population base being part of the formula, because over the original formula that, for example, CCA is working on was designed in, I think the last time it was reviewed was 1996. Well, there's certain areas of our state that, if you look at their population change, it has drastically changed from 20-some years ago or 30 years ago to today. And if we don't look at what that population base is, it's very difficult to provide the appropriate level of services. So the next part of that formula was then to provide the capitated rate. And that's where we get into some of our evidence-based practices. And what we want to look at is how is that how many people do we have under supervision? What is their risk level? What is our caseload sizes? And what does that mean for full-time equivalency requirements to supervise? Is it appropriate? So if we looked at it from the American Parole and Probation Association, they are saying that to have a high-risk caseload, the appropriate supervision level would be between 40 and 50 individuals. That's still quite a high caseload of saying that we're going to provide rehabilitative services and appropriately supervise 40 to 50 people for one probation officer. But so we're trying to say, so if we have high risk level, what is the appropriate caseload size in Minnesota? Other parts of it is how many support staff do we need? How many, what types of things do we need to provide, for cars, vehicles? How do we provide that supervision at the appropriate level? The state is responsible for felony supervision, supervised release, or probation supervision. That they're supposed to fund that at under the state requirements. Gross misdemeanor and juvenile cases are under statute supposed to be covered at 50%. So we're also trying to build that piece into this formula of the fact that the funding level should be higher for the felony supervision and then at 50% for the gross misdemeanor and juvenile cases. So that's the basics of our formula. It's really complicated, but I wanted to at least give you kind of part of the process. We are working through each individual thing, and one of the most important pieces of this is we don't want anybody to go backwards, right? We don't want to call it a hold harmless, but really we need to make sure that we at least each county is getting as much as they start with so that we can address where that community corrections and address public safety in the process.
So I think there's no ask here today.
There's
other
no
than
ask
continued
today.
support. We
I
already
just
did
wanted
that
an
with the resolution that you said all 87 counties have now signed on to, which is super. We thought we'd get this over the finish line last year. It didn't happen. We got to make it happen this year. I want to just point out a couple of things that you talked about, the complexity, and I don't disagree with that. How I found it sort of easy to understand the different delivery systems is Department of Corrections kind of deals with the more serious stuff, the prisons and, no?
No.
No, well, let me go back.
Okay.
And county probation takes a lot of stuff. CCA counties do it all.
Yes, that is, okay,
That is
yes, I should have
the
let you
analogy
finish.
that I'm trying to use, is that some do some do other. CCA does it all. And even though only 33 or 36 counties are involved, they're big counties that have a lot of clients, like Ramsey and Hennepin and Anoka, Dakota. I think Dakota is.
Yep, all of the metro counties, actually, all of the metro counties are CCA.
So that's why you see that huge number, 77,000, compared to what Department of Corrections does. So this is important to a lot of counties, and I'll stop here and let you guys ask questions if you have questions of it. Commissioner Anderson.
So what are you hearing? Is it a good chance it'll pass this year, or?
So right now, we have a ton of support.
Okay, yeah.
Right now, we're seeing a ton of support.
We
There
did
is-
last year too.
We
so.
did last year too, and so, but last year was kind of nothing went right in the end. We do have a lot of support. We have a lot of discussion. The last 3 years, I've been doing this a long time, and the last 3 years, we've had more people interested in talking about corrections than I've ever seen. And the idea of the fact that we need to provide that service to address public safety, that we need to provide the evidence-based practices to reduce recidivism, to keep more victims from occurring, and to address the safety in our communities. And that an individual response is very important.
Commissioner Berg.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yes, as you said as well, Mr. Chair, and you're saying this is our last big chance. When I look at that, we thought we were there last year. We weren't there last year. And with the funding and the resources the state has now, this is the time to do it. And it's really important that the legislature steps up, and the Department of Corrections and the governor's office step up, and everybody works together to get this through and get to the finish line. I want to give you some kudos that you still got loads of energy. I mean, you've been working on this for years and being such an advocate, and not only for Candioi County, but for the whole state, for these services. And that's so important that we got to this point because of people like you are out there doing this. The question I had is, are there any other obstacles that you could possibly see besides the ones you mentioned already?
So one of the biggest obstacles we're going to have is what that kind of came up in the last couple of weeks. That one of the reasons I'm not showing you the entire formula at this point is really goes to show, if you remember where I showed you on the grid, that Minnesota is last in spending.
Yeah.
Right, across the country. Well, when we created this formula with the idea that we want the integrity of the formula to be first, okay? So we went to the basics. We didn't look at the numbers. We didn't look at what this meant for numbers. We wanted to say, okay, this is what's important for the integrity of the formula first. Well, I will tell you that when we started running the numbers, they were higher than we could have possibly ever imagined, and that could be a challenge for us. But at the same time, it really goes to show the fact that we are severely underfunded in the state of Minnesota, and it's really critical that we figure out how this is going to go. If we're going to actually fund it where it should be, we need to address that.
So when you say running the numbers, you mean dollars?
I mean the dollars. When we took this formula and we applied it to every county, and then we came up with an amount at the end, it was significantly higher than what we'd originally expected. And, to be frank, it was ran between 75 million to 275 million of increased annual funding just to get us to the base level.
That's for
Commissioner Gardner.
For the whole state, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Dr. Lieberg. Then just to follow up with that, where would that place us on this continuum?
question,
You have the slide that,
So it would, if we went to that level, it would actually only bring us up into the average. So if I bring us back to that slide of where we were at, it would only, even with that funding, we would be around 5.6 is what we're looking at. It's a little complicated to figure out. This graph was created by the Council of State Governments. And so they had access to everybody's funding differently than we did. And so when we tried to go back and put it in there, I'm telling you, it's a little general, but I know we're somewhere between 5 and 6% of the general fund.
so this is at least a doubling, if not more, of the current funding.
Yes, we are severely underfunded by the state. And so that's where,
That's it.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think from talking to you in the past, if I understand it right, right now, these things are mandated by the state or by the courts, and it has to be done, and we get stuck doing it. And if we don't get funding from the state, it goes on property tax levy dollars, or what, it gets put back on the property owners in the counties. And so what we're just asking for, since it is mandated, that the state cover a lot more of these costs that they've, they mandated, it's almost like an unfunded mandate if
It is.
To some extent.
And it's a little of both, if I can.
So for people that are listening, though, they're maybe thinking that we're asking for more money, and we're really not. We're just asking for kind of a equity or to have the state pick up what we think should be their part of the commitment, right? And it would, if they did that, it relieves the property tax, people that are paying property taxes. Am I correct?
Yes, and there's two pieces to this.
Okay.
Okay, and so if this goes through, I will be coming back to you with a plan of how, hopefully very soon, cross our fingers, of this is what this looks like for our county in terms of how do we offset some of that property tax, because we now have the appropriate level of funding from the state, so that we're able to reduce some of our county, or we're able to include that in our budget, not necessarily, so that we don't have that increases at the county level, okay? But also it allows us to go in and add those evidence-based practices that we're talking about and provide more adequate supervision, provide more community safety, create more opportunities for reducing recidivism in an appropriate way. And one of the more exciting things about this is, we talk about our evidence-based practices. Part of this piece that we're looking at is how do we not only provide quality assurance for our staff, providing those evidence-based practices, but how do we do data and record it and provide more information back to you about what we're doing? Because right now we just don't have the ability, with the lack of funding that we have, to provide that information at the level that we should, to prove what we're doing is good work. So, there's a piece into this about, and that they're talking about. Another piece that they've talked about, just so you're also aware, and you may hear this quite a bit, and we are dealing with this at the legislative level, talking about how this would impact counties. But several of the legislators are pretty determined to bring statute out that would require us to drop our probation fees. So that would have an impact on our overall budget if I wasn't able to charge probation fees that we right now depend on to support our services. The concern with that from AMC level is well, if you bring our, our funding up, but you take funding away, we actually could end up behind. We're back at square one. And so it's really complicated, and there isn't any valid reason to have probation fees that would affect somebody's rehabilitation, right? There isn't, but we are dependent, and we have been since the 90s, on charging probation fees to support our services and what we have going on in our
So those
agency.
probation fees, then who pays that?
So the
charge that
the
off?
people that are on probation,
They pay for that.
they pay for it. They
Do
pay.
they always pay, or is that kind of a hard?
No, they don't always pay, but
Okay.
we actually, as part of that, sometimes we go through tax, we get their taxes. Sometimes, there's lots of ways that we can access it, but that's more work too. So I would tell you that if this comes through, we're gonna have to look at how much, where does it balance out? But yeah, we collect probation fees on a variety of different things.
So part of that could be garnishing their wages if they have a job.
Yep.
Okay.
We charge, not only do we have a supervision fee, we have a transfer fee if somebody wants to transfer out, we have an intake fee, we have fees for program services, and we charge for urinalysis testing. So there's lots of fees out there. I'm not really sure where they're going, but that's one of the things that they're talking about. But again, we have to be really careful. There's a good reason to get rid of probation fees if you look at it and many counties have. Many counties across the state have said, we're not going to charge probation fees anymore. But I want us to be really cautious before we go down that path, because I don't have anything to replace it yet.
Commissioner Berg.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I had a question. You know, this is not just a county problem or a city of different cities' problems, but it's a state problem. But it's also a federal problem or a countrywide problem, corrections. And often we talk about the state funding. How does is there federal dollars involved, and how does that affect all of this? I think I know my answer, but yeah. Could you
So
clarify?
that could be, that right now in our area, we're not accessing any of the federal dollars directly into my department. There's
what I
like
thought,
some other
yeah.
areas that do. We would be able to access funds through federal dollars through grants, if we could apply for grants in different things. For example, 6W just, to our south, just got picked for a major federal grant. Right now, I don't have any here in our community, but it doesn't mean we couldn't in the future.
May I follow up?
Yes.
Do you know then, does the state then get some federal dollars for corrections? And part of the money we're asking for is part of that pot too?
So there is through the Department of Justice, and yes, we could again access some of those federal funds for special projects, but the base level services we're talking about, again, are really a state and a local responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot of information. I just, and I hate to almost say this because it may plant a seed. So the rather large increase that we would need, that you're proposing, that would actually just take us up to the median, the way it looks to me, or the mean.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion of them phasing that funding in, or would that be a one felt swoop adjustment?
We're just starting that process because we've been scrambling, right? Meeting weekly to get this stuff. Our proposal went in front of the AMC committee last Monday. It actually just went to the Commissioner of Corrections shortly after that. We had 4 meetings last week on this with lots and lots of questions. We have more meetings this week, and then, like I said, it goes in front of, we have our House hearing on March 17th that we will be at to answer more questions. This is very complicated, and that might be one of the options because it's such a large ask, but we're just kind of really starting to look at what it means now.
So one of the things that I would say too is that we meaning counties all over Minnesota, Association of Minnesota Counties, this has been our number one priority. It seems like the last 2 years now, and we have a lot of really high priorities. It'd be really great to check the box on a few of these things that, whether it's infrastructure, or corrections, or public health. So thanks for all the hard work you do, and let's keep pushing till we get the success.
Yeah, I hope to come back with more positive information as we keep going through this process, like I said, and we'll hopefully be looking at how do we redesign and create the best community corrections for our community. Not that we don't already have what we could, like a really good one, but I think we can improve. We can always improve and do lots of new things and address public safety across our county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have so many notes here, I can't see which ones we've completed. The next one is the resolution 2023-11 application for clean water revolving funds. Mr. Oden.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mel Odens, Public Works Director for the county. In front of you is a application resolution 2023-11. And in some of the background information, what I've done is, this is the 5th resolution in this process of meeting current standards at the waste. This is the waste treatment plant. We've done other work at the water plant. This is the waste treatment plant. But maybe the high level, we have a $13.5 million project that's primarily due to 2 things. One is aging. The plant is 23 years old. But the second one is that they keep tightening down the regulations on effluent discharge. And in this case, it's phosphorus. And so when we were going through the process of signing the next 5-year MPCA discharge permit, there are certain requirements that they were making us do. They tightened it down. So the discharge is going to require us to increase our phosphorus control. So in the background, in the bottom, we applied for a grant. The grant requires you to enter into design services to know what you really need for improvements. Then we did an interfund loan because we have to borrow from ourselves to start the design services. We do an intent to reimburse so that it's bond eligible when we sell the bonds. And then what we do is we had a contract, in this case with Bolton and Mink, to do the design. So now we're up to the stage where we're eligible for a grant. We know what the risk is on the cost. And so now the PFA requires you to actually make application for the loan. So then we have 5 million of that is grant eligible. I don't want to confuse you, but it gets confusing even for somebody that's in it all the time because there's so many steps to this process. So we now know that it's around $13.5 million. We've got all the supporting instruments so that it's bond eligible retroactive because we've done an intent to reimburse. This application allows us to realize up to 5 million in a grant. We're hoping to get some fraction of that, and so you might ask, what's the risk to the county? When we did the rate study a few years ago, we worked assuming no grant, and we still lowered our annual debt service by almost $800,000. So the rates can handle this debt. So it's a risk. It's an enterprise fund, so it's supported by the revenues in the enterprise. It's not supported by the general population debt of the county. So the risk to the county, in some respects, would be low because it's handled in an enterprise fund. But with that being said, we want to make sure we do our due diligence with debt service and so it looks like when you ask for a loan, $13.5 million, it's covered under debt. We're hoping to get a $5 million grant. What that would do is it would reduce the debt service or the meter fees on all these users. So with that being said, is there any questions on what we've been doing or the process or?
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mel, if we're having to tighten down on phosphorus, of course, everybody else who runs a system like this is in the same boat. So the city of Wilmer and
That was a big reason.
everybody, which means that everybody else is going to be going to the PFA for some grant money too.
Yep.
And so we're just kind of hoping that there might be some money comes our way.
Yep.
And in order to do that, we just simply need to make this application and find out.
Yeah, and so what they do is they have an intended use list, and so they'll fund this, and then they keep drawing the line, and they'll fund the next ones. So there's not a guarantee that we're going to get it this time, but we didn't get it last time, so we're hoping that we get it this time, or some version.
And then, is there any danger, I presume there is, because it's the PCA, of standards changing during this process?
No, because our permit was signed with this being the requirements of the next permit, which I believe is 2026 in this case. So, the big part of this really is when you remove more phosphorus, you have more biosolids. And so we don't have the storage for land applications. So a large chunk of this is just going to be building onto the storage facility. And then the other thing, and the administrator and I talked about this briefly, is there's other parts to this project that are unintended consequences, like we're a utility. Okay, Kaneohe County has a utility here. We've been supported by others in this utility, namely the city of New London has done our billing, Kaneohe Power has done our billing. we don't know how long that's going to last. And so we're making some plans on adding to the admin building because, number one, we're growing. We went from like 11 square miles to 57 square miles. We've added 2 staff or 3 staff. If we start doing billing, we're going to need to either outsource it to a third party or in-source it with staff. And, you know, an administrator and I are going to start that discussion because I think we've got maybe 2 years. But not to confuse the situation, but it's you know, it's a facility that probably looks new, feels new. It's not new, and you're dealing with very toxic material, very toxic material. And so some of these pumps, I think, have been running. I think Corey Smith indicated the one pump's been running like since day one, right?
Yep.
I mean, he knows this system inside out. And so these are needed improvements. It treats, like I said, 6 lakes, 3 communities. A lot of people depend on this system. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would ask that we approve resolution 2023-11 and also authorize the signing of the supporting form documents 4 and 5.
So you've heard the request from staff. How do you wish to move?
I so move that we support resolution 2023-11.
Commissioner Berg moves on 2023-11. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. I'd just add one point to this is that a little bit to Commissioner Anderson's point about affecting ratepayers, or in this case, it's ratepayers, not taxpayers.
Correct.
This is a huge deal. If we can achieve that $5 million grant, it's a huge deal to the users of this system. And to take it a step further, that's why it's so critical that we get an adequate bonding bill passed at the legislature this year, because that's where that funding comes from. Thank you. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. So does anybody want to break before, yes, so we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Kennewick County Board of Commissioners meeting. Next on our agenda is a presentation of Minnesota Housing Trust Fund. We've seen this iteration before, but with a little luck, we've got a final version here that can be approved. So Jill Bankston, our HRA Director, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board.
And for those who couldn't hear me, state your name and who you represent.
Sure, and I am Jill Bankson. I'm the Executive Director for the Candioi County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. So today I am in front of you again to discuss the idea of establishing an ordinance to create a local housing trust fund. And just to recap, housing trust funds are allowed to be established by cities and counties under Minnesota Statute 462C.16, which was established by the state legislature in 2017. Since then, 21 cities and counties in Minnesota have created these funds, and their purpose is to create a local tool to fund in whole or in part projects that meet local housing needs. So communities are looking to create these funds in order to be competitive for future state funding that'll become available and will only be available to cities and counties that have established these housing trust funds. So the draft ordinance before you would establish the Candioi County Housing Trust Fund. Its purpose is to create or preserve both owner-occupied and renter-occupied housing for households at or below 115% of median income. And to give you an idea of what that threshold is, if you were talking about a family of four, the income limit would be $96,169 for the household. A one-person household is $67,349, and a two-person household would be $76,978. And so the funding from the Housing Trust Fund would come from basically any source: private donations, local public funds, or state matching dollars. And if established, the HRA has already designated $175,000 to start the fund, and the HRA is proposing to administer the fund on behalf of the county. The proposed ordinance is just the foundational document. It's broader and more vague. And when we last discussed this idea of establishing it, you asked that I present you with some more details on the activities that would be created with the fund. So you should have before you also a policies and procedures manual. And on page 4 of that document begins with the activities for development. The first is new construction for owner-occupied homes activity. That would provide developers with 0% deferred loans up to $75,000 to develop 5 homes. The loan would be repaid to the Housing Trust Fund when the last home is sold. A developer can have up to $25,000 of that $75,000 loan become a grant if the developer receives from the local government both building permit fees waived and at least one utility hookup fee waived. If nothing is waived, then the maximum dollars the developer can get from the trust fund would be $25,000 for 5 homes. Page 5 describes the acquisition, rehab, and resell activity. Again, 0% deferred loans would be provided for up to $20,000 to develop 2 homes. The loan would be repaid to the Housing Trust Fund when each home is sold. $5,000 of the $20,000 loan can be a grant if the developer receives, again, building permit fees waived or at least one utility hookup waived. If nothing's waived, the maximum loan a developer can receive for 2 houses is a $10,000 loan. Page 6 gets into new construction activity for the development of affordable rental housing. Under this, a developer can receive 1% 15-year loans for up to $300,000 to create housing with monthly rents at the level of the Candioi County HRA's Housing Choice Voucher Program. To give you what the rent levels would be currently, and these change every year in October, but currently a 2-bedroom apartment would rent for no more than $1,017, and a 3-bedroom, $1,446. Owners would be expected to offer their units to those eligible for the Housing Choice Voucher Program and pass annual inspections during the term of their loan. Monetary penalties up to 15% of the loan would be imposed if the project rents fall out of compliance with the affordability requirements. Monetary penalties equal to $1,000 per unit per month would also be imposed if the unit falls out of inspection compliance. And the HRA is also paying the owner a monthly payment on behalf to help a tenant with their rent. Page 7 describes market rate rental unit construction. And again, developers can receive 3% loans for 15 years up to $300,000. The reason for the higher interest rate would be because these units can be a higher rent and there's less affordability requirements in the project. We would require that they make 10% of their units eligible to Housing Choice Voucher Program recipients. The same monetary penalties would apply as for the affordable units. Page 9 begins the activities for rehab of existing housing. The first is the owner-occupied rehab activity for homeowners, and it would provide households at 115% median income, 10-year, 1% loans for up to $15,000 to make repairs. Page 10 gets into the rehab, rental rehab activity. Rental property owners can receive up to $56,000. You had an error on your page. This is, they can get up to $56,000 to repair up to 16 rental units within no more than 3 separate properties. So this is geared towards small rental property owners. They can apply for funds for up to 3 properties, and those 3 properties can't have more than a total of 16 units in them. Funding would be 1% loans with monthly installments for a term of 10 to 20 years, depending on the amount of the loan and cash flow. For all of the activities described, a 15-year deed restriction would be recorded against the property to keep projects affordable as the loans intended. Policies and procedures will be a working document, and they will change as funding levels in the trust fund change and as the housing stock needs change in the community. And with that, Mr. Chair, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bangston. Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jill, just one small housekeeping thing first. On page 11, there is the section where it says 4 or fewer units, 5 to 20 units, but the limit is 16 units.
So,
I assume there's a correction coming to that at some point.
Yeah, so that correction would be to delete that third bullet that says project 21 or greater units. That whole bullet would be deleted. That middle bullet would say project with 5 to 16 units, not to exceed 56,000.
All right. And the action that you are asking us for today, I just wanted some clarification on this. We need to move to introduce the ordinance and schedule it for a public hearing. Is that the procedure? Okay. Well, to start the process, and I would make that motion.
So there's a motion on the floor to schedule a public hearing. Is that what your motion was for approving this ordinance?
Introduce the ordinance and schedule a public hearing on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I will second that motion.
Commissioner Berg seconds. Any discussion? And I assume there's a little.
Yes. And just to follow up, Jill, there is some urgency in establishing this because presumably there's some funding coming from the state government, the state legislature, that we would be eligible for if we had this.
Yes.
And we just simply need to get this framework in place.
Correct.
And then we would also be taking a separate action at some point in time as to how much of our ARPA funding we would want to put towards this. We don't need to do that today, though, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. A similar question that I had. Anybody else have any questions?
No, just a comment, Mr. Chair, if I may. It's exciting to be at this stage. We've talked about housing and our crisis that we do have. So this is a plan that looks well worth tweaking and see if we can make this work. Speaking of the ARPA dollars, then I'm assuming then we're going to probably have a work session or something coming up along that lane. Maybe to think about, I'm just thinking.
Yeah, it seems to me, Commissioner Berg, it seems to me that it's been a long time since we talked about some of that breakdown of the ARPA funding, other than broadband, which was acted on pretty early.
And childcare.
There had been a targeted amount, and maybe I'm thinking about childcare, but I don't know that for sure, that there was a suggested amount that we use as some seed funding for this.
I have one in mind, but I think I think we'll save that for our internal
Okay.
discussion.
All right, thank you. One of the questions I had, Ms. Bankston, is I know I think it's the governor's budget that has like $3 billion, if I'm not mistaken, for housing. And of course, that gets appropriated probably based on population, around the state. Would that money just get then put into this fund along with the ARPA dollars and whatever other dollars we have just to start the fund?
Right, so a couple of things. So first, in a past legislative session, there's already been money appropriated to a state housing trust fund that Minnesota Housing will be administering, and they have not announced the program yet or have asked for grant apps. And then in the current legislative session, there's also more money being discussed to be put in there, so we'll see how that happens. But yes, then once that's announced, all these cities and counties that have established this are going to be submitting competitive applications to the state and be asking for matches towards our fund. And we don't know, so I'm hoping that we will have enough in our fund to get the maximum amount from the state if we submit a competitive application.
And do you have any fathom as to what that amount is?
No, don't.
Okay.
No.
And how would this trust fund be, what would the effect of the trust fund be on other sources of housing money, say USDA, rural development, or any other
Yeah.
opportunities?
I think it will also help us be more competitive in going after other funds. So we typically apply for small cities funds through the Department of Deed, and you always have to have local match funds to apply for those competitive grants. The more you put into it, the more competitive you are. I think it will also help private developers who are applying for housing tax credits through Minnesota Housing. They want to see local matches, and I've kind of run this by prospective developers to see, would this work for you? And so I think so having this and having those funds will make us more competitive for other programs.
So then when you say we're talking about Kennesaw County HRA is going to try to build that fund as big as we possibly can from the different sources. But then when it comes time to proposing a development, say an apartment complex or whatever, is that on the developer to understand all the programs and understand the opportunities? Or do we, meaning HRA or the county, market the opportunities that we might have?
It's on us to market it and let prospective developers know it's available, and then encourage them to come and apply and help them work through that application process.
Mr. Baker, did you have I saw you pull your mic, okay. Any other questions or comments? And do we have, we have a motion on the floor that we haven't voted on? Okay. I think our motion would you repeat the motion? It's to.
The motion is to
establish an
introduce the ordinance for the Housing Trust Fund and to schedule a public hearing.
Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Connie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, as you can see on the agenda,
Your name and.
oh, yes, I'm sorry. Good morning. My name is Connie Mort, and I am the Human Resources Director of Candy, Ojai County. I come before you today about a matter. We have a staff opening, and it is for our county recorder, which we're required to have a county recorder on staff. Our prior county recorder, her last official day of employment was Friday, March 3rd. And so I come before the board today presenting our senior employee in the department, Julie Munson, as a prospective interim county recorder. And I ask that the board appoint Julie Munson into that position effective Monday, March 6th.
So, you heard the request. I'd entertain a motion for interim recorder.
I'll make that motion that we hire or appoint Ms. Munson as interim county recorder.
Commissioner Anderson moves on the request from Human Resources. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any questions or comments? So, formerly, this was an elected position.
No.
Oh, wait.
Ms. Culp, our prior county recorder was elected to begin with, but was appointed
When her term
later
was
by
up,
the
then
board.
we went to appointments.
Correct.
And that is the intent now, is to go
Yes.
by appointment.
To keep it as an appointed position.
And so is that position posted now, or?
It is not posted at this time. We wanted to establish an interim county recorder so that we would have one on staff per statute. And then we would go forward with the hiring process. We anticipate that we would have a county recorder candidate in May of 2023.
And we're a little fortunate in that this is a slower time of the year for real estate transactions, so the demand isn't quite as high as it would be in May or June, or, through the summer, so.
That is correct.
We want to stay on this schedule. So.
And if I can, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, if I can say something too, Connie and I have been discussing this, and as coming on to the county in February, as of February 15th, we want to make sure that as we have people retire, have people transition out of the county, that we relook at this position, make sure if we want any changes, restructuring. And so that's something that we'll start doing. If we have a retirement, we want to make sure that we look at this position. Is this a department head position? Is this a supervisory position? What does that look like? And so we don't want to have a long vacancy in the position, but we're very fortunate that Julie is stepping up. She's a good candidate for our interim. She's learning the ropes, things like that within the department. And so we have some time now to make sure that moving forward, we've done our due diligence and making sure that we're going to go in the right direction.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I believe we have a motion, don't we? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, Connie.
All right, thank you.
All right. Our last item on the agenda is, I haven't missed anything, Mel Odens.
Yep. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mel Odens again, Public Works Director. It feels like this Corridors of Commerce application, this New London Modified Interchange comes up maybe more than it should, but I was learning in the last 2 weeks, after the last meeting, we have regular updates on our application as we go through up to about 30%, like 2D concept design, that the scoring process didn't take into account any matching funds that up until a week ago I thought were in there. So that's good because it lessens maybe our responsibility on the corridors of commerce, but it's bad because the county for 6 years has indicated that we were willing to put local option sales tax to this improvement here. So the county is fully committed. The taxpayers of this county are fully expecting this is one of our sales tax projects. And in fact, we had put 1.9 million toward this project some years ago, I believe in 2017. Then as the process was coming forward, we were dealing with the pedestrians at this intersection because New London is on both sides of Highway 23. So we had worked with MnDOT to incorporate additional funds toward this. I've got all these supporting documents right here. And we were willing to go up to about 2.3 million to allow pedestrians through the highway. Then we worked up to at an application, so I did an application for corridors of commerce. And we had requested the full 26 million for this interchange. It would be bond funds through the corridors of commerce. And now in the rating process, they assume all 26 million is state money. So now you see what's going on here. We were willing to do up to 2.3 as of like last November 21st is the last time I brought this through the county board as of November 21. So my recommendation to the county board is to, because of inflation, because we have the funds, and it will improve our benefit cost calculation, to commit up to 2.5 million toward this project in local option sales tax, because that will, we heard the community wants a modified interchange. They want this corridors of commerce application to be successful, and anything we can do to help that cause is good. So that's my recommendation to the board. My further clarification on that might perhaps be their commitment to that level would be for the modified interchange. Okay. There's other options out there that the people in this area don't want. So if it switches direction, I would like to come back to this body to discuss that again. Okay? Our minimum was 1.9, where I'm recommending 2.5 toward the interchange. If it's another solution, I think we come back. So it's a specific motion for this, if that makes sense.
So I want to make sure everybody's clear about the ask is that and it's an increase from 1.9 to 2.3 to 2.5, but we've got inflation going on. We're collecting more sales tax than what we had anticipated. We're actually, in the interchange design, we'd be eliminating the underground pedestrian, which was going to cost us quite a bit of money to maintain over the years. So I can justify that the 2.5. We're going to get one opportunity here, but what I really want to make clear is that this proposal is for the modified interchange, not for any other design that might come forth if we fail at the modified interchange. Is that?
That's 100% correct. I think loud and clear, 70% of the people want the modified interchange. The voters voted to spend 1.9 million of sales tax to improvements here. I think that's what we owe our we're the local government here.
So I'd entertain a motion on the request from Public Works. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and entertain that motion to support Mr. Oden's recommendation that we move our optional sales tax to 2.5 million to support this corridors of commerce application.
And I would second.
Commissioner Gardner seconds. Any further discussion or question? Commissioner Byrd.
He was first this time.
Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mel, the overall project is pegged at 26 million.
Yep.
10% of that is 2.6 million. Does it matter that we're just below that 10%? Or?
No, I mean, this is one of 8 calculations in the application, and it's just one small way we can improve our chances, and this is the benefit cost ratio, and I feel pretty strong that this is an easy one for us because we've committed money to this intersection for 7 years.
Sure.
So my point is I don't think 2.5 versus 2.6 matters.
Okay.
No.
That was my question.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Byrd.
I just want to clarify again, this is coming out of the budget we have of the optional sales tax budget. So we're not talking about adding levy dollars or anything like that.
No, that's
So the
correct.
public is clear on this, that these are budgeted items.
Right. In fact, you might recall, we were going to have this built in 2021. We brought it to this board to actually take the plans to bid in 2021. And so the money is there. The money is already been collected there, so it's there. So sales tax, yep.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thanks.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that concludes our agenda for the meeting today. But are there any calendar updates that we should be reminded of between now and our next meeting? Or a little beyond that, if you want. I see,
Yeah, if I can,
go ahead.
March 28th, it's Tuesday from 8:30 to 11:30, the Road and Bridge work session will be held at the Public Works office. And we have a tentative agenda, but we will send that out prior to that date.
Yep, yep.
Any other calendars from any of the commissioners? I'm just scrolling through mine quickly to see what,
Mr. Chair, while you scroll, I can,
oh, our Kansas County Township meeting is on the
Oh,
20th.
yes.
20th.
Yeah, so March 20th, I believe that starts at 8:30. And that's at the American Legion.
It is, okay.
I believe that starts at 8:30, or is it 9?
No, I think it's,
I think it's 9. I think
the meeting might start at 9. I think
okay.
registration, that's, yeah, it's not, we just are presenters,
Yeah.
so.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Ms. Baker, you're going to register us all then, or is it somebody going to register, or do they need to know who's all
Is
attending?
that, are you talking the township?
Yeah.
Do you typically all attend the
I
township
think there was
meeting?
a
I think
request.
we already did.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
we
were
have
supposed to let
already.
Karen know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
We did that like
taken care of. Thank you.
a while ago, I think. I think it was already.
Okay, we'll double check.
I think
Okay.
so.
Anything else that, of importance? If not, we stand adjourned.